Welcome to Diana the Storyteller channel. Let's jump right into the story. The warm afternoon sun shone down on Liberty High School's grassy yard. Most of the students were either finishing up lunch or chatting under the big oak tree near the benches. The air was filled with laughter and the faint screech of sneakers against the blacktop from a nearby basketball game. Everything seemed peaceful, until it wasn't. "Hey, check this out," sneered Jake Miller, the school's notorious bully, as he kicked at a small gray cat that had wandered onto school property. The poor animal let out a frightened meow and tried to scurry away, its little paws slipping on the slick concrete. From a few yards away, Barron Trump's best friend Ethan noticed the scene and felt his blood boil. "Hey, leave it alone, Jake!" Ethan shouted, stepping forward without thinking twice. Jake turned, grinning with that cocky smirk he always wore. "What are you going to do about it, nerd?" he taunted, taking another step toward the trembling cat. Ethan clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He had never been one to back down from a fight, even if Jake was bigger and stronger. "I'm serious. Walk away now." Jake laughed, clearly enjoying the attention. "You got guts. I'll give you that." And then, without warning, Jake lunged at Ethan, knocking him backward. The two boys tumbled onto the grass, arms flailing as they wrestled. Barron, who had just returned from grabbing a drink at the vending machine, saw the chaos unfolding. "Ethan!" he yelled, sprinting toward the fight. Without thinking twice, Barron jumped in, grabbing Jake's arm to pull him off his friend. "Get off me, rich boy!" Jake snarled, trying to shove Barron away. The scene quickly caught the attention of a nearby teacher, Mr. Jenkins, the grumpiest and most biased teacher at Liberty High. He had a reputation for showing favoritism to certain students, and unfortunately for Barron and Ethan, Jake was one of them. "What's going on here?" Mr. Jenkins barked, storming over with an angry scowl. "Fighting on school grounds? Unbelievable." "But sir, Jake was—" Ethan tried to explain, breathless from the struggle. "I don't want to hear it," Mr. Jenkins cut him off, waving a dismissive hand. "You two troublemakers are always stirring up nonsense, and now you're attacking poor Jake? Absolutely unacceptable." Barron's jaw dropped. "Are you serious? He was hurting a defenseless animal. We were just trying to stop him." Mr. Jenkins narrowed his eyes. "Enough with the excuses, Barron. You think just because your father is Donald Trump, you can do whatever you want around here?" "Not on my watch." Barron felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. "That's not what this is about, sir. We didn't start this." "I said enough," Mr. Jenkins snapped. "Both of you. Detention. No more arguing." Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "This isn't fair." As Mr. Jenkins continued to berate the boys, none of them noticed a familiar figure standing just outside the school gates, watching the entire scene unfold with sharp eyes. Donald Trump himself. As Mr. Jenkins continued his scolding, Donald Trump calmly made his way toward the group. His presence, though commanding, was oddly subtle. Students around the scene began to whisper in shock. After all, it wasn't every day a president of the United States casually strolled onto school grounds. "Excuse me, sir," Trump said in a firm but composed voice, cutting off Mr. Jenkins' mid-rant. "Do you usually jump to conclusions without hearing both sides?" Mr. Jenkins turned abruptly, visibly surprised but clearly determined to hold his ground. "These boys were caught fighting. That's all I need to know," the teacher snapped, crossing his arms defiantly. Donald tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing. "That's so?" he asked, looking between Barron, Ethan, and Jake, the notorious school bully who now stood smugly by Mr. Jenkins's side. "You didn't think to ask what happened first?" "Sir, I know these types," Mr. Jenkins insisted, clearly flustered by Trump's questioning. "Troublemakers through and through." Barron clenched his fists in frustration, but stayed silent. Ethan looked equally fed up, his face flushed with anger. Donald took a step closer. "Well," he said slowly, "I've learned a thing or two about fairness. You ever hear of innocent until proven guilty?" His voice grew sharper. "Maybe we should let the facts speak for themselves. Let's check the security cameras, shall we?" A sudden wave of panic swept over Jake's face. "Wait, no, that's not necessary," the bully stammered, his confidence evaporating. "It was just, an accident, really." Mr. Jenkins, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to back down, muttered, "There's no need to waste time with that." "On the contrary," Trump shot back, flashing his signature smirk, "I think it'll save us all a lot of time." The group made their way to the school's office, where the principal, alerted by the growing commotion, reluctantly agreed to pull up the footage. As the video played, the truth became glaringly obvious. Jake was seen approaching the small stray cat near the playground, raising his foot threateningly before Ethan intervened. The scuffle that followed showed Barron stepping in to break up the fight, not instigate it. The room fell silent. Donald leaned back, arms crossed. "Well, looks like we have ourselves a plot twist," he said smoothly. Mr. Jenkins' face turned beet red. I suppose I may have misjudged the situation," he stammered awkwardly. He turned to Barron and Ethan. I owe you both an apology." Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying the sudden change of heart, but Barron nodded politely. "And Jake," the principal said sternly, "this behavior is unacceptable. There will be consequences." Donald added with a chuckle, "Maybe it's time you learned a thing or two about kindness. Got any ideas?" The principal nodded thoughtfully. "Starting tomorrow, Jake will be responsible for feeding and caring for the school's stray cats for the next month." Jake's jaw dropped. "What? You can't be serious." "Oh, I think it's a great idea," Donald said, his tone amused but firm. "Builds character." As Jake sulked out of the room, Donald turned back to Barron and Ethan. "Good job standing up for what's right," he said with a proud nod. "Sometimes the world needs people who won't just walk by when something's wrong." Barron grinned. "Guess you're right, Dad." "And Ethan," Trump added, shaking the boy's hand. "You got guts, kid. Keep that up." As they walked out of the office, the weight of the earlier injustice lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of fairness and hope. And, while Jake might not have been thrilled about his new duties, the school cats would soon discover they had an unexpected new friend. The next day, Jake stood in the schoolyard, a heavy sack of cat food slung over his shoulder and a scowl plastered across his face. A small crowd of students gathered, whispering and chuckling as he filled several clean bowls with food near the makeshift cat shelter by the trees. The stray cats watched cautiously from a distance, their tails flicking in curiosity. Yeah, Jake muttered under his breath as one bold tabby cat approached. "Don't get used to this." But something unexpected happened over the course of the next week. At first, Jake begrudgingly did the bare minimum, tossing food into the bowls like it was a punishment. Yet, the cats had a strange way of softening even the hardest hearts. One particularly scrappy black kitten seemed to take a liking to him, following Jake around the yard whenever he showed up with food. By the second week, Jake was spending more time crouched down, gently petting the cats as they nuzzled against his hand. Students passing by started to notice the change. "Is that Jake? Smiling at a cat?" one girl whispered to her friend in disbelief. Barron and Ethan watched from a bench nearby, sharing a knowing glance. "Looks like he's finally learning how to be a decent human being," Ethan said with a grin. Barron laughed. Who knew cats could teach life lessons? As the days passed, the once tough bully became a familiar sight at the cat shelter, not just feeding the animals, but also cleaning up after them, and even building a small shelter out of spare wood with the help of a kind-hearted janitor. Meanwhile, Mr. Jenkins had also undergone a bit of a transformation. The incident with Donald Trump had shaken him, forcing him to reflect on his behavior toward students. He made a point to be fair and attentive in his classroom, even giving Barron and Ethan a well-deserved apology in front of their peers. One afternoon, after school had let out, Donald Trump visited the campus again, strolling across the courtyard with Barron at his side. "You know," Donald said with a smile, "I think that bully might actually turn out okay." Barron nodded. "Yeah, who would have thought?" "That's the thing about second chances," Trump added. "Sometimes people surprise you." Ethan jogged up to them, breathless but grinning. "Hey, Barron, you coming to practice?" Barron turned to his dad, who gave him a nod. "Go on," Donald said. "I'll catch up with you later." As Barron and Ethan headed toward the field, Donald watched them go with a sense of pride. The school was different now. Fairer, kinder, and a place where students learned more than just academics. They learned about courage, justice, and standing up for what was right. And thanks to one scrappy black kitten and a month of feeding duties, even Jake had learned that it was never too late to change. If you watched the video till the end and want to hear more inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Take care of yourselves.